Think people are leaving Florida because of politics or weather or culture? That's not what the numbers show. What's actually happening is quieter and far more serious. Across Florida, families who did everything right are running the budget again and realizing something unsettling. Their income didn't collapse, their lifestyle didn't change, but the numbers no longer line up. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly where Florida residents are moving, why those places work, and what broke financially inside Florida first. This isn't opinion. It's not headlines, it's household math. Let's start with one family in Tampa, because their story explains the entire exodus. Sarah and Michael bought their Tampa home in 2021. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a decent neighborhood near good schools. They weren't stretching. They qualified comfortably, put down 20%, and locked in a 3.25% mortgage rate. Sarah worked as a registered nurse at Tampa General, earning $78,000 a year. Michael managed a warehouse distribution center, making $52,000. Together, they brought in about $130,000 annually, well above Tampa's median income, solidly middle class, financially stable by any reasonable definition. They ran the numbers carefully before buying. The mortgage came to $1,800 a month. Property taxes ran about $600. Homeowners insurance was quoted at $425 monthly, just over $5,000 a year. HOA fees were $250. All in, their housing costs totaled $3,175 a month. On their combined gross income, that was 29%, just under the threshold economists consider sustainable. They had breathing room, savings, money for their kids' activities, and the occasional dinner out. Then the insurance renewal arrived in March of 2025. It was one of those thick envelopes you know contains bad news before you even open it. Inside was a number that changed everything. $18,400 a year. That's $1,533 a month, just for insurance. Triple what they'd budgeted. Triple what they'd paid less than 2 years earlier. Sarah spent days calling insurance agents across Hillsborough County. The lowest quote she found was $16,200. The highest topped $22,000. Most carriers wouldn't quote at all. They'd stopped writing new policies in Tampa, and many weren't renewing existing ones without massive increases. And insurance wasn't the only cost that moved. Property taxes rose 38% as the county adjusted millage rates to offset declining values. Their $600 tax bill became $825. HOA fees jumped from $250 to $375 after the community's master insurance policy tripled and got passed through to homeowners. Their new monthly housing costs looked like this. Mortgage, $1,800. Insurance, $1,533. Property taxes, $825. HOA, $375. Total, $4,433 a month. On the same income, that pushed their housing burden past 40%. And that was before childcare, utilities, cars, groceries, healthcare, or anything else a family actually lives on. After childcare, transportation, utilities, and food, they were left with less than $1,000 a month. Not to save, not to plan, just to absorb whatever went wrong next. They cut everything they could. Streaming services disappeared, gym memberships were canceled, eating out stopped, their kids' activities were reduced. They found about $400 a month in savings. It didn't come close. This is the part people misunderstand about affordability crises. It's not irresponsibility. Sarah and Michael were earning well above the city median. They weren't living extravagantly. They were living normally, and the numbers still stopped working. And that brings us to the key concept behind Florida's exodus. Economists distinguish between magnitude and velocity. Magnitude is how expensive something is. Velocity is how fast costs change. People can adapt to high costs. They can't adapt to costs that triple in 3 years. If Tampa housing had reached $4,400 a month gradually, families would have adjusted. They could have negotiated higher pay, planned career moves, or made long-term decisions. But when housing costs jump from $3,175 to $4,433 in just 36 months, there's no adjustment mechanism. Salaries don't triple. You can't cut 40% of a household budget that fast. Life isn't built for that kind of shock. That velocity, not just high costs, is what forced families out. Sarah and Michael tried to ride it out. Over 6 months, they burned through $8,000 in savings. Michael picked up weekend shifts, pushing 60-hour weeks. Sarah looked at switching to nights for differential pay. But childcare logistics, they weren't living anymore. They were surviving. The breaking point came in August. Their air conditioning unit failed. 12 years old, replacement only. The quote was $7,800. They didn't have it. Financing wasn't an option. They put it on a credit card at 23% interest because a Tampa house in August without AC isn't habitable. That night, Sarah opened her laptop and typed something she never expected to search. Cities where nurses make similar salaries but cost less. And that's when the math that would take them out of Florida began. The search results showed her something she hadn't considered. Atlanta metro hospitals were actively recruiting experienced nurses, offering compensation packages nearly identical to Tampa, $76,000 to $80,000 for her experience level. But when she started looking at housing costs in Atlanta suburbs, places like Kennesaw, Marietta, Smyrna, areas with good schools and reasonable commutes, the budget math transformed completely. She found a 3-bedroom home in Kennesaw listed at $365,000, comparable to their Tampa home's current value. The mortgage would be slightly lower given similar interest rates. But then she started getting insurance quotes for that Georgia address. $1,400 annually. Not monthly, annually. She thought it was a typo. She called the agent. No, $1,400 annually was correct. Sometimes as low as $1,200 depending on the carrier and coverage level. Let me show you what that meant. Tampa housing costs $4,433 monthly. If they moved to Kennesaw, Georgia, mortgage $1,750, insurance $117 monthly, property taxes around $400 monthly. HOA fees minimal or non-existent in many neighborhoods, so let's say $100 monthly. Total $2,367 monthly. $2,367 versus $4,433. That's a $2,100 monthly difference, $25,200 annually that would just reappear in their household budget. Money that could rebuild their savings, fund retirement accounts, pay for their kids' activities, let them actually live instead of just surviving. But Sarah's not impulsive. She spent 2 weeks researching Atlanta. Job market, schools, crime statistics, healthcare quality, commute times, neighborhood characteristics. Michael looked into warehouse management positions and found the distribution sector in Atlanta was actually stronger than Tampa, with Amazon, Home Depot, UPS, and dozens of major logistics operations offering competitive salaries. They could both maintain their career trajectories, possibly even advance faster in a larger metro market. They visited Atlanta over a long weekend in September, drove through neighborhoods, talked to people at coffee shops and playgrounds, just casual conversations about what it's like to live there. The consistent theme they heard, we moved here from Florida 3 years ago and the financial pressure just disappeared. By October, they'd made the decision, listed their Tampa home at $375,000, knowing they'd probably have to negotiate down given market conditions, started job hunting in Atlanta in earnest. By November, Sarah had accepted an offer at Northside Hospital in Atlanta for $77,000, a $1,000 pay cut that would feel like a $30,000 raise once housing costs factored in. Michael received 2 offers, accepted one at $54,000, actually a $2,000 increase. They closed on the Tampa house in January of 2026 at $348,000, took a $27,000 loss from their purchase price, but still walked away with enough equity after closing costs to put 20% down on the Kennesaw home. They moved in February. I want you to understand, Sarah and Michael weren't leaving Tampa because they disliked it. They loved their neighborhood. Their kids had friends. They'd built a life there. But love doesn't pay mortgages, and nostalgia doesn't cover insurance premiums. When the math forces you out, emotional attachment becomes a luxury you can't afford. Now, here's where this story becomes about more than one family, because when you look at U-Haul rental patterns, mortgage transfer records, school enrollment data across Florida metros, when you actually map who's leaving and where they're going, Sarah and Michael's trajectory isn't unique. It's the pattern. Georgia captured more Florida outmigrants than any other state, and the math driving that migration is identical across thousands of families. But Georgia isn't the only destination. Tennessee emerged as the second major magnet, and the reason reveals something important about what Florida families value. Tennessee offers the same no state income tax structure that originally attracted many people to Florida. For families who'd specifically chosen Florida to avoid state income tax, Tennessee preserved that benefit while solving the housing cost crisis. A Tampa family earning $73,000, Tampa's median household income, looking at Knoxville or Chattanooga, would find housing costs around $2,000 monthly all in, compared to $3,500 to $4,000 in Tampa. That's $12,000 to $24,000 annually in housing savings while maintaining the tax structure they valued. Nashville proper has gotten expensive, nearly as costly as Florida metros in some neighborhoods, but the surrounding counties, Rutherford, Williamson, Sumner, still offer reasonable housing costs for middle-class incomes. The migration pattern shows economic rationality, not random scattering. Families aren't just fleeing, they're moving to specific destinations that solve specific problems. Georgia and Tennessee solve the housing cost problem while maintaining cultural continuity of the Southeast, avoiding harsh northern winters, and preserving proximity to extended family who might still be in Florida or other southern states. The Carolinas captured the third major wave, and this is where professional workers become the story. Charlotte specifically emerged as the primary destination for Florida's professional exodus. The nurses, the accountants, the tech workers, the engineers, the healthcare administrators, people with college degrees, professional skills, career trajectories who discovered Tampa or Miami salaries couldn't overcome Tampa or Miami housing costs. Charlotte offers something unique, a robust professional job market rivaling Florida metros, but housing costs running 30 to 40% lower. A nurse earning $78,000 in Tampa could earn $76,000 in Charlotte, but have $18,000 more in annual disposable income after housing costs. That math makes Charlotte a better high-income city than Tampa, despite lower nominal wages, because real purchasing power is what matters, not the number on the paycheck. And this is where Florida's crisis becomes Florida's permanent economic problem. When you lose professional workers, when nurses leave for Charlotte, when teachers leave for Raleigh, when tech workers leave for Austin or Nashville, you're not just losing population, you're losing human capital. You're losing the people who run hospitals, teach advanced courses, code software, manage complex projects, pay high property taxes, and contribute disproportionately to civic engagement and community stability. Cities can survive losing some working-class families. That's economically harsh, but recoverable. Cities cannot survive sustained professional class exodus because those workers are harder to replace, take longer to train, and their departure creates cascading failures across institutions that depend on them. Tampa Bay hospitals reporting 40% higher nursing vacancy rates in 2025 compared to 2022. That's not a staffing inconvenience. That's a healthcare system capacity crisis that makes the city less livable for everyone who remains, which accelerates further departures. Teachers represent the most critical professional exodus because they're the hardest to replace and the most essential to family decisions about where to live. A Florida teacher earning $58,000 discovered they couldn't afford housing in the district where they taught. They'd need $65,000 to $70,000 just to reach sustainable housing burden. Moving to Georgia or Tennessee often meant accepting $54,000 to $56,000 in salary. Technically a pay cut, but real purchasing power increased by $12,000 to $15,000 after housing costs. When school districts lose veteran teachers, educational quality declines, test scores drop, college acceptance rates fall, and families with children, the demographic cities need for long-term vitality, start looking elsewhere. It's a doom loop. Professional exodus degrades city services, degraded services drive family exodus shrinks tax base, shrinking tax base cuts services further, but working families and professionals leaving for better math. That's at least economically rational migration. The third wave is different. The third wave is investors capitulating, and that's where the future of Florida real estate becomes genuinely uncertain. Small landlords, individuals who bought 3 to 8 rental properties as retirement income strategy, as wealth-building vehicles, as generational asset development, started running the numbers in 2024 and 2025. And the numbers showed systematic portfolio destruction. A West Palm Beach rental property purchased in 2021 for $480,000 generates $3,200 monthly in market rate rent. That's $38,400 annually in gross income. Against that income, the landlord faces insurance, $21,600 annually. Yes, landlord policies in Palm Beach County hit 5 figures easily. Property taxes $9,800 annually. HOA fees $6,000 annually in many managed communities. Maintenance reserve, responsible landlords budget 10% of rent for maintenance, so $3,840 annually. Those fixed costs total $42,200 annually before the mortgage payment. The property generates $38,400. It costs $42,200 before debt service. That's negative $3,800 annually, negative $317 monthly, And we haven't even paid the mortgage yet. If there's any mortgage remaining, and most investors purchased these properties with financing, not cash, you're looking at negative cash flow of $700 to $1,200 monthly depending on the loan terms. The only way that investment math worked was through property appreciation. The landlord accepted negative monthly cash flow because the property gained value, paper losses monthly, wealth accumulation annually through equity growth. But West Palm Beach property values declined 11% from 2023 to 2026. Instead of appreciation offsetting negative cash flow, depreciation compounded it. The landlord lost $317 monthly in operations plus $44,000 in equity erosion, $52,800 in total annual wealth destruction. How long do you hold an asset that's destroying $50,000 annually in wealth? The rational answer is you don't. You sell immediately. But selling into a distressed market means accepting losses. Properties purchased at $480,000 in 2021 are receiving offers around $320,000 to $360,000 in 2026. Accepting those offers means crystallizing $120,000 to $160,000 losses. Some landlords, particularly those approaching or in retirement who needed to stop the bleeding, made the excruciating decision to accept those losses. They sold at catastrophic discounts, and institutional investors were waiting. Large investment firms who can afford to hold properties through downturns, who can absorb negative cash flow across large portfolios, who have access to capital small landlords don't. They offered 40 to 45 cents on the dollar, knowing small landlords were trapped and desperate. A small landlord who paid $480,000 received offers of $192,000 to $216,000. Taking those offers meant losing $264,000 to $288,000 in capital. But continuing to hold meant losing $4,000 to $5,000 monthly indefinitely while values declined further. Eventually, the bleeding has to stop. Where did that capital go when small landlords exited? It didn't disappear. It relocated to markets where rental property math still works. Georgia rental properties, Tennessee properties, Carolinas properties still generate positive cash flow because insurance costs $1,200 to $2,400 annually instead of $12,000 to $22,000. The same investor who faced portfolio destruction in Florida could generate 8 to 12% returns in Atlanta or Charlotte or Nashville with identical management effort. The investor exodus matters because it removes patient capital from Florida markets. Small landlords are the investors who maintain properties long-term, who build tenant relationships, who contribute to neighborhood stability. When they're replaced by institutional investors focused on maximum extraction over minimum timeframes, rental market dynamics shift in ways that harm tenant experiences, increase turnover, and ultimately undermine property values further through neighborhood instability. So we've documented 3 waves. Working families left for financial survival. They ran the budget math and couldn't make it work. Professionals left for quality of life. They could technically afford Florida, but discovered comparable careers elsewhere offered dramatically better real purchasing power. Investors capitulated. The wealth building model broke and rational capital allocation demanded exit. But the 4th wave? The 4th wave is the one that reveals just how comprehensively Florida's housing math failed, because these are the people who did everything right. Robert and Linda moved to Naples in 2021. Robert had just turned 68, retired after 42 years as an aerospace engineer in Detroit. Linda retired at 66 from a career in healthcare administration. They'd planned this move for 20 years, saved aggressively, paid off their Michigan mortgage, built retirement accounts to $1.2 million, secured good pensions. Robert received $4,800 monthly. Linda, $3,600, combined with Social Security, bringing their total fixed monthly income to $8,400. They bought a Naples condo, not waterfront, not ultra-luxury, just a nice 2-bedroom in a 55-plus community with a pool and activities. Purchase price, $575,000. They paid cash. No mortgage, no debt, complete financial freedom. Their monthly fixed costs in 2021, HOA fees $650, property insurance $475, property taxes $900, utilities $300. Total $2,425 monthly, leaving $6,375 for everything else. On $8,400 monthly fixed income, $2,425 in housing costs represented 29%. Sustainable, manageable, exactly what their retirement planning projected. They had money for travel, for dining out, for spoiling grandchildren who visited from Michigan, for healthcare costs that Medicare doesn't cover, for the retirement life they'd worked 4 decades to earn. The insurance renewal in 2024, their first renewal after the initial policy period, arrived at $7,300 annually. Unfortunate, but absorbable. The 2025 renewal hit $14,600. The 2026 renewal, the one that arrived last month, came in at $23,400 annually. Let me walk you through what that did to their fixed income budget. Insurance went from $475 monthly to $1,950. Property taxes increased as Collier County raised millage rates. Their $900 monthly became $1,300. HOA fees increased to $800 as the community's master insurance policy tripled. New monthly fixed housing costs, HOA $800, insurance $1,950, property taxes $1,300, utilities $350. Total $4,400 monthly. Fixed income $8,400 monthly. Housing $4,400. Remaining $4,400 for healthcare, food, transportation, every other cost of existence. Now, Medicare premiums, Part D prescription coverage, supplemental insurance to cover what Medicare doesn't. Those run approximately $800 monthly for a couple in their early 70s. Prescription medications for chronic conditions common at that age, even with insurance, another $300 to $400 monthly. Healthcare alone consumed $1,100 to $1,200 monthly, leaving $3,200 to $3,300. But here's the thing about being 73 years old with chronic health conditions. You have regular doctor visits, occasional unexpected medical expenses, the need for quality healthcare access. You have higher utility costs because you can't tolerate temperature extremes. AC runs constantly. You have home maintenance you can't do yourself anymore. You hire people for tasks you used to handle. You have transportation costs, even though you're not commuting. Doctors are spread across Naples. Grandchildren are in Michigan requiring flights for visits. Robert and Linda's actual monthly budget after housing and healthcare, about $1,800 for food, gas, maintenance, phone, internet, any leisure activities, any gifts for grandchildren, any travel to see family, any emergency expenses, any quality of life beyond pure subsistence. They'd gone from comfortable retirement with disposable income for travel and experiences to financial stress management at ages 73 and 71. And here's the cruel mathematics of fixed income. Robert's pension won't increase. Defined benefit pensions pay what they pay. Linda's pension might see small cost of living adjustments, but those rarely exceed 2 to 3% annually. Social Security offers COLA adjustments averaging 2 to 3%. Their total income might grow $250 to $300 monthly annually. Insurance companies are projecting continued rate increases of 15 to 25% annually through at least 2028. If Robert and Linda's insurance increases 20% annually, and that's the conservative projection, their $23,400 becomes $28,080 in 2027, $33,700 in 2028. That's $2,800 monthly. Their fixed income won't be $2,800 higher, it'll be $400 to $600 higher. The gap widens, not closes. At that trajectory, they'll be depleting retirement savings at $2,000 monthly just to cover the deficit between income and essential costs. At that burn rate, their $1.2 million in retirement assets, carefully accumulated over 4 decades, exhausts in 50 years. Except they're 73 and 71. 50 years is impossible. More realistically, they have 15 to 20 years of life expectancy. At $2,000 monthly depletion, that's $360,000 to $480,000 in retirement savings consumed just covering housing cost acceleration, leaving far less cushion for healthcare crises, long-term care needs, or leaving anything to their children. Robert and Linda made a decision last month. They listed the Naples condo at $540,000, likely take a $30,000 to $40,000 loss after selling costs, but they'll escape while they still can. They're moving back to Michigan, not to Detroit proper, but to a suburban community near Ann Arbor where their daughter lives with her family. They'll buy a smaller condo there for $300,000, maintain some equity buffer. And here's the math that makes Michigan suddenly attractive despite snow and cold. Homeowners insurance in Ann Arbor runs $1,400 to $1,800 annually. Property taxes around $4,000 annually. Total monthly housing costs around $900 to $1,000. They'll go from $4,400 monthly in Naples to under $1,000 monthly in Michigan. That's $3,400 monthly, $40,800 annually in housing savings. But more than the money, they'll be near their daughter and 3 grandchildren. When Linda needs help after a medical procedure, family is 5 minutes away instead of requiring flights. When Robert's mobility declines, he's already showing early Parkinson's symptoms. They won't be isolated retirees in Florida hoping neighbors notice if something goes wrong. The reverse migration of 65-plus population from Florida to Midwest origin states is quantitatively small so far, maybe a few thousand annually at most. But directionally, it's enormous. For 40 years, the pattern was consistent. Retire to Florida, live out your years in sunshine. That pattern breaking, even modestly, signals something fundamental has changed. When retirees who achieved the Florida dream voluntarily return to snow and cold, it means the dream died. It means the math doesn't work even for people who supposedly won at financial planning. And here's what that means for the properties they leave behind. Robert and Linda's condo will sell. Eventually, someone will buy it. But at what price and to what kind of buyer? The next buyer faces the same insurance costs Robert and Linda couldn't sustain. If that buyer is another retiree on fixed income, they'll face the same crisis in 2 to 3 years. If that buyer is an investor converting it to a rental, they face the negative cash flow dynamics I described earlier. Properties aren't disappearing from Florida. They're sitting longer on the market, selling to buyers who may not be able to sustain ownership long-term, or transitioning to investment ownership with different maintenance incentives and tenant experiences. When you look at days on market data across Naples, Tampa, Miami, averages running 140 to 180 days compared to 40 to 60 days in 2022. That's not normal inventory cycling. That's a liquidity crisis where supply exists, potential demand exists, but transactions are difficult to complete. And here's the doom loop mechanism this creates. Properties sitting vacant or poorly maintained decline in condition. Declining properties reduce neighborhood appeal. Reduced neighborhood appeal makes surrounding properties harder to sell. Harder to sell properties experience further price reductions. Price reductions decrease property tax revenue for municipalities. Decreased tax revenue forces service cuts or tax rate increases. Service cuts and tax increases make cities less attractive, driving additional departures. The cycle feeds itself. Florida municipalities are starting to experience this in real time. Tampa's property tax revenue in 2025 came in 8% below projections despite millage rate increases because property values declined faster than rate increases compensated. That 8% shortfall forced cuts to parks maintenance, library hours, and road repair budgets. Cuts that make Tampa marginally less attractive, which contributes to further departures. I want to be clear about something. This isn't speculation about what might happen. This is documentation of what is happening. The U-Haul data shows net outflow. The school enrollment data shows declining student populations in multiple Florida counties. The hospital systems are reporting elevated nursing vacancies. The insurance carriers keep projecting rate increases, not stabilization. The properties are sitting on market longer. The doom loop isn't a future risk. It's current reality. So let me pull this together, because when you see the pattern across all 4 waves, working families, professionals, investors, retirees, what becomes clear is this isn't about preference or lifestyle choice. This is about broken math that isn't fixing itself. The fundamental problem is divergence between costs and incomes, amplified by velocity that prevented household adaptation. Insurance costs increased 150 to 250% over 3 years. Property taxes increased 30 to 45%. HOA fees doubled in many communities. Those are compound annual growth rates of 25 to 50%. Household incomes grew 3 to 5% annually. When costs diverge from incomes by 20 to 45 percentage points annually, no amount of budgeting discipline closes that gap. For families to stay in Florida at current cost trajectories, they'd need income increases of 40 to 60%, not over careers, but over 2 to 3 years. That doesn't happen outside of extreme career changes or geographic arbitrage. That requires leaving Florida. The math is circular. To afford Florida requires income growth that requires leaving Florida. Insurance companies are projecting continued annual increases of 15 to 25% through 2028, based on hurricane exposure models, claims experience, and reinsurance costs. Even if those projections are conservative and increases moderate to 10% annually, that's still triple the rate of income growth. The divergence continues widening. Property values declining puts upward pressure on millage rates as municipalities try to maintain revenue, which means property taxes continue increasing even as home values fall. HOA fees face similar dynamics. Master insurance policies keep rising, maintenance costs increase, all pass through to homeowners. The cost pressures aren't easing, they're structural, not cyclical. Until something fundamental changes, comprehensive insurance market reform, dramatic cost reductions, or wage acceleration that seems implausible, the exodus continues because families don't need permission to leave, and they don't need coordinated action to create migration patterns. They just need a calculator, a budget spreadsheet, and 6 months of trying to make impossible math work before they start searching for cities where comparable incomes actually sustain comparable lifestyles. Georgia will keep gaining population, Tennessee will keep attracting no-income tax migrants, the Carolinas will keep capturing professional workers, the Midwest will keep seeing reverse retirement migration, and Florida will keep losing not just people but tax base, not just workers but human capital, not just residents but the civic infrastructure those residents supported through spending and engagement. This is the math behind Florida's exodus. Not politics, not culture, not weather preferences, just household budgets that stopped balancing, velocity of cost acceleration that prevented adaptation, and economic rationality that eventually forces families to choose financial survival over geographic preference. If this analysis helped you understand the financial forces behind the largest migration shift in modern Florida history, subscribe to Uncover the Cities for economic forensics that connects data points others miss. Like this video, share it with anyone running Florida housing math themselves. The exodus isn't slowing, it's accelerating as more families reach the same mathematical conclusion Sarah and Michael, Robert and Linda, and thousands of others already reached. The only question is whether Florida's math changes before the exodus becomes permanent transformation of who can afford to live there.